I rolled over my side, breached a grenade, and when all of a sudden I felt a thud in my left leg, and it started to burn and bled, and I was hit for the first time.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade
to meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
I was born in Appleton, Wisconsin, raised there, went to high school there, then went on to University of Notre Dame for college, and then came to Pittsburgh. You know, I think the love of the game of football was an evolution. You just played. You know, you played pickup games. You played in the backyard. You played some organized sports as you were growing up in junior high. And coming out of Notre Dame, and especially at that time, going back to the 1966 national championship year, was all of a sudden there starts to be a belief system of what you can and cannot accomplish, no matter what size you are or how you can play. So, we play in the game of the century against Michigan State. We go undefeated that year, and kind of the lesson that you learn is that you can compete with people. You can compete with the All-Americans that play on other teams, and they're really no different than you are, except they may have speed or they may have size, but that you can play in that realm. I think that becomes a very important idea. And so I get to so that's my junior year. My senior year, I become captain of the football team, and we lose 2 games that season, my senior year. Did I want to play professional sports? Yeah, I did. From an ego point of view, and I thought, that'd be great, if we could get drafted. And so, yeah, I do get drafted, and I get drafted by the Steelers. And so then I was the 417th person picked in the draft that year. I was a 16th round draft choice. But as I tell people, I said there were 17 rounds. At least I was not the last guy picked. I might have a chance to be able to make the team. And people say, well, how'd you make the team back then? And my response is, do you remember who played for the Steelers in the 60s? That's how come I made the team, because nobody can remember who played for them during that period of time. But I was one of 4 people that made the team. And I think probably the happiest day of my life had taken place when I was in training camp. Bill Austin was the head coach with the Steelers. And after one practice, I was coming out of a meeting, and he took me aside and said, Rock, listen, he said, we think you're good enough to make this team. And we got this letter in the mail, and it was open accidentally, and it was my 1A classification. He said, and we'll take care of this for you. Now, I don't know what taking care of this meant, but the biggest thing was you're good enough to make this team, or we think. Taking care of it was, well, okay, fine. So growing up in Appleton, Wisconsin, following the Packers in high school and in the 60s, and as I had said, the Vietnam War was continuing to go on. So you got stories about, some of the players. Some players would then go into the reserve or the National Guard, take care of that responsibility. There was also a height-weight a variance that some people fell in. They were just too big to be able to go into the military. So in the back of my mind, it would be like, oh, okay, fine. I guess, that's what happens. If you make the professional team, they will take care of this and get you in a reserve. So that was always there. And, so a couple of months went by, and I asked the Steelers, hey, did you hear anything about taking care of this? And they go, we got a problem. Or as I like to tell them, yeah, we got a problem. The general retired, the congressman got defeated, and all the people that we know, aren't in position to be able to make that move. And it was the height of the war, 1968. We had the most people over in Vietnam. We had over 500,000 people, so they needed bodies. And basically, I fell through the cracks, and I got my draft notification. Yeah, I was somewhat surprised, and but that was it. So it was a call home, make arrangements, pick up my clothes, my car. I'm going into the service, and I was gone. So when we flew into Vietnam, so it was, so we got off the plane and we got on these buses. So I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know I didn't know if there was fighting on the tarmac. Whether people were going to be shooting at you when you got off. We got off the plane and we got on a bus, and we got on buses to transport us to base headquarters. And so. And the buses had wired all over the windows and so on, and primarily because of the fact that, I guess people would throw hand grenades or stuff, or could possibly have done that. So anyway, so you drive through and we get to base camp, basically, and you process through that as well. So, and that's another week or maybe 2 weeks while you're going through that before you get your assignment of the unit. And that is some jungle techniques that you didn't get in AIT, what is apropos in Vietnam, what is going on during that period of time. So it was just some more learning, understanding, and then you finally get your orders to report wherever. So my orders then came down, and I was to report to the AmeriCal Division, 4th of the 31st Infantry, 196th Brigade, Charlie Company. And so I met up with Charlie Company. I was attached then to 1st Platoon, 1st Squad. And but the interesting thing is that I got to their base, and they had been out on a sweep. I didn't know what that meant until later on, but how it operates in Vietnam at the time is that you operated off of landing zones. So within an area of operation, there would be what they call LZs. That's where the artillery was situated on top of these hills or mountains, and there was a landing zone. So all the food and news and everything came there, and then it would be dispersed there from. So we would rotate from a LZ down into the field. So there was 4 companies within this area, and you'd rotate off of 2 LZs. So let's just say, as an example, you'd be on an LZ for a week, then you'd be down in the field for a week. Then you go up to another LZ for a week, then you'd be down in the field, then you'd make that rotation all the way through. So if you're on the LZ, basically you're pulling security for the artillery and all the personnel that are up there. And then every day, one of the squads would take a sweep off the hill down into an area that they were to cover, and then come back up that night. And so then that would rotate during a period of time. Then when you're down in the field, you'd be with your company down in the field, and then there was an area that you would have to transfer over that whole week, cover, see what's taking place, and then go back up to the other LZ. So now, so I'm now waiting for my new company to come up, and so they had just come up out of the hill, the commanding officer and the first sergeant, and the rest of the platoon. And so I'm going, ooh. And they're just drudging themselves up. And I was the first new guy to be introduced to this company in 3 months. And my first reaction to them was, ooh, they looked old. I mean, they had that 1,000-yard stare. They just were drudging coming up the hill. And so I met my commanding officer, Tom Murphy, at the time, met the first sergeant. He assigned me to the first squad. I said, okay, or first platoon. Then I got into the first squad. And then they said, okay, we need a grenadier. So you'll carry the M79 grenade launcher. Okay, fine. So I carried the M79 grenade launcher. Now, the M79 grenade launcher was like a shotgun. So it was a one-shot, broken barrel. You put a grenade in, shoot it off your hip, shoot it off. But you had to carry all your grenades along with you. So I had to carry like 60 grenades with me when we were doing these sweeps and so on. And so that was, and they weren't light. So that was my responsibility. So as I said, we were working off of LZs. We were on LZ Siberia. A sister company, Company D, was in the field. All of a sudden, we knew, or there had been information over the last several days, we were on alert. We, as the company, were on alert, 24-hour alert over the last 2-3 days, that anything can happen. So from intelligence, we knew something was going on. As a private, I didn't know whatever was going on. And so all of a sudden, Company D had been hit. They were in a firefight in the field. So we were then extracted off of LZ Siberia down at the field, and we were to get to them to help get them out of that hot spots. And by the time we got to them, it was late in the evening. So as we were coming in to see them, it was night, a firefight was going on, helicopters, and you could see tracer bullets going back and forth. And we're picking up the wounded and the dead as best they could during that period of time. So we got to Delta Company, and it was at night, as I had made mention. So finally, there was no fighting that was taking place, and the word was, okay, fine, we're going to move out. And so we were to pull front and rear security. What people were left behind, and there were 5 dead soldiers that we had to carry out, and so that was our responsibility. So I was one of the guys. We put a very simple bamboo pole, tied him to the bamboo pole, and carried them, started carrying them out as we did the other. So as we're moving out of this area, the point people ran into another firefight late at night. And so all of a sudden, I don't know, it must have been about 10 o'clock at night or so, we dropped the bodies. We were in a firefight, and then the word was, okay, we're going to leave the bodies and let's move out, because we're afraid that they would find our location and then start lobbing mortars into that location to hit us. So we moved out back to our secured area in which had been set up by another company. So we did. Now, 2 days later, our mission is on a reinforced company, or platoon, I should say, reinforced platoon. We're going back to retrieve those bodies. So I was with our commanding officer and our platoon. And so we had just taken a break about 8 o'clock in the morning, find our location, and word was to move out, okay, on an open rice paddy. Keep 5 yards distance between one another. Keep your eyes and ears open. The enemy, they're around. And so I was 8th in line. So as I stepped out of that open rice paddy, took a couple steps, all of a sudden our point man, who's maybe now 40 yards in front of me, saw movement across the berm, and in his excitement made a fatal mistake. Rather than holding up the rest of the platoon, assessing the situation, he saw movement, hollered gook gook, shots broke the stillness, they started to run, he started chasing, pulling everybody out in the middle of that rice paddy, when all of a sudden, out of the hillsides, you could hear a machine gun going. Well, bodies were diving left and right into the rice paddy in front of me, and so I jumped in. The rice paddy was relatively dry, crawled on my hands and knees to the end of it. So I saw where the machine gun was, as I said, maybe 150, 200 meters away, up on the hillside. And so my responsibility, of course, was to be able to get some firepower on it. I rolled over my side, breached a grenade, And when all of a sudden I felt a thud in my left leg and it started to burn and bled, and I was hit for the first time that day. Discharged that round, so figured, hey, I better drop back behind some protection. So I did, pulled a gauze over my wound, and then got enough firepower on that position to at least silence the machine gun. 4 guys were pinned down in the open, so they got out. The medic came over, and he and I crawled back to our commanding officer. And the rest of the platoon in the field finally came crawling in, and we set up another defensive position. And the enemy probed our position, got close enough, and then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, see a grenade come flying through the air, end over end, and hits my commanding officer right in the middle of the back, and he's lying prone, and it bounces off his back and rolls towards me, and I was but 3 feet from him as I was sitting there, and I got up to jump, and it blew up, and I was standing on top of it. And so, and then we were in another firefight, until a sister platoon fought its way down to drag us out of there. And they started carrying us and dragging us out as they pulled front and rear security and got us out there. We lost, I think, 5 soldiers that day, and half the platoon was either dead or wounded coming out of that conflict. So the biggest extent to my injuries, besides the bullet wound in the left thigh, which was particularly, is that I had nerve damage coming up out of my foot, broken bones out of my foot, and the major work was on my foot. So I lost all sense of feeling, movement. And fortunately, I didn't lose any part of my foot, just damage. I couldn't bend anything and so on. So it was just a matter of cleaning out not only that wound, but all the shrapnel that was in my legs and so on, and they took those out. And so fortunately, damaged as it wasn't like I lost a leg or a foot or any of that nature. But the prognosis was, when asked, that I'd never be able to play again because of that damage, because of the lack of flexibility and in movement in that or strength within that foot. So he said, you're going to have a normal life. I mean, do things that normal people do. Just don't expect to get back on the gridiron. He said, you just won't have the strength or the flexibility to do the things that are necessary to be a running back in the NFL. And so that was and he kind of just sucked that hope, right out, at that moment in time. And then shortly thereafter, and so this part of the story is I got a postcard in the mail, and the postcard had 2 lines on it. It said, Rock, team's not doing well, we need you. Art Rooney, owner of the team. And so all of a sudden it was like, ooh, somebody needs me. Not that he needed me, but that was, there was a boost of confidence, or a boost of, hope that, somebody cares, at that time. So being the Steelers, being part of the family, I mean, being the Steelers and how they did it, the Rooney family, so when I came back, I went to training camp. And I, stumbled through training camp and so on. I had some shrapnel still working its way out, and I had another operation on my foot. So they put me on injured reserve that year. And I came back the following year and went through training camp again and was a little bit better. And I made the developmental squad, or the taxi squad, as they called it back then. I got to suit up for a couple games at the end of the season because everybody got hurt and they needed some special teams players. But that was okay. And so, but they bought me 2 years to heal and get better and get stronger, and be able to, come back and hopefully make the team. I worked on my speed, my starts, and my 40 time, and so on in the off season. And I also started to lift some more. So by 1973, I come back, and it was the best shape I was ever in. I was 218 pounds. I bench pressed 465 pounds. I squatted 600 pounds. And in training camp that fall, or that summer, I was timed in 4.55, 4.6 and 4.65 in the 40, which was pretty good, for a guy that had no speed. So all of a sudden they saw the changes. And here becomes the biggest thing. What they saw was things that I did. So I'm 165 pounds. I come back the first year, I'm 190 pounds. Then all of a sudden they see this change in this person over this 3-4 year period of time, and increase my speed, and quick. So it was just an indication of how badly I wanted it, and I think that made an impression on them. And then I made the team. So I was a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, came back and I made the team. And because of the fact that because I became a historian, because we were successful, and it put Vietnam, on the top of the list. And so all those Vietnam veterans out there who were repressed, who didn't get the credit or the pat on the back, all of a sudden, here was one of ours that made it and got through and got recognition for his service, which the rest of us, can ride on his coattails or whatever it might be, but that well deserved, that we all should have gotten at that time.